What's up, y'all? Welcome to episode 2 of the Cars on Camera podcast. So far, I've really enjoyed doing this. Like I said, it's been a really good kind of purge for me, just being able to talk about cars with other people that do the same thing. And I think today's guest is actually really cool. I met him through a mutual friend, my friend Haley. She's pretty much like my car angel. And back in 2020, that was only my first year in business. And so 2020, once 2020 started, I was still kind of doing stuff until around March when COVID really hit. And right then, it seems like all my clients everything stopped. And I emailed pretty much every dealership in Austin. And Haley was the only one to respond. And literally ever since then, she's been connecting me to the coolest people, connecting me to the coolest cars, and has really helped kind of get my feedback on track with making car content. And so it makes perfect sense that she introduced me to who I have here with me today. I'm gonna let him introduce himself, and then we're just gonna talk cars like we always do. Okay.
Nice. Well, good afternoon. My name is Glen Nordell. I've lived in Austin since '94, and I work at a private car collection owned by a local guy named Jeff, and that's what I do.
Cool. When did you actually start? Well, I guess I should say this. How did you and Jeff meet? Because I actually don't know that, and I've been meaning to ask you that. How did y'all meet?
Well, so in 2014, a couple friends of mine and I had started a car storage business called Petrol Lounge. And they are still running that car storage business. And it's really the only high-end car storage business in Austin. We had started renting space in this building to, do the business. Eventually, Petrol Lounge outgrew the building, so they moved, and I stayed behind to work with Jeff. But so just like, pretty much anybody else, before you start working for someone, I had met Jeff because I would see him driving around in fancy, cool cars, and I'm like, hey, how you doing? I'm this guy, and he's very nice. He's a very nice man, but he's got lots of people trying to talk to him, and I was just one of those people. But when I started running this business in his building, he got to see firsthand, what kind of person I was, what I was capable of. Can he trust me?
Right.
And so, when it came time for the car storage business to move, he had already dropped some hints like, hey, if they ever fire you, I'll hire you. And I was like, hey, remember when, they're moving out, so I kind of want to stay in this building. So anyway, so that's how, I met him through the car storage business, really, officially, but then I just stayed with him.
Nice. And I've said it to everybody since I've seen this collection. This is easily one of my favorite car collections I've ever seen in person because it truly is a mix of everything.
Yeah.
And even when I used to do car meets locally back in my hometown, I would always stress the fact that I want everyone there. Like I want older people, I want younger people, I want muscle cars, I want tuners, I want trucks, I want, lowered cars, lifted trucks. I want everybody there because I truly think if you're a car guy, there's something that's interesting in every car culture, every subculture.
Absolutely,
there's something to like. And I feel like his collection, even if you look behind you and behind me, you would think it's two separate collections.
We're in two different locations,
I have old trucks and a Mercedes wagon behind me, and then you have an F40 and a Countach behind you.
Right.
So I think his collection is amazing. So I guess, how would you kind of describe what it was like managing this collection and
Yeah, so he describes it as his motley crew of misfits.
Yeah.
And there's lots of reasons behind that name for his car collection. So, and like you, I like his car collection a lot too, and not just because I work here and manage it. And a lot of it has to do with the person behind the collection, right? And then as you get to know the owner of the cars, and it's really why he buys the car. So he does get lucky with some cars. He bought the F40, back in 2014. It's more than doubled in value since then, right? So that's, good ROI on that, right? But that's not why he buys cars.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you a couple cool stories. So, and then the stories that he makes with the cars is also fascinating.
Yes, I was going to say that too.
Yeah. So he bought a Triumph TR6 from my father-in-law.
Okay.
And I was asking him, like, what is why do you want this Triumph TR6? Like, it's not a bad car. It's a cool car, but like, the day before he'd bought like a Porsche. It was the Accumoto Porsche, which is like this really cool. It's kind of like a roof Porsche. Anyways, and I'm like, all right, it's Triumph TR6. I guess you're gonna whatever.
Yeah.
Like maybe you're just throwing my father-in-law a bone or something.
Right.
I don't know. But so he tells me, he's like, well, my sister dated 2 different guys who had Triumph TR6s when we were younger, and he's like, I always thought they were really cool, and like now I can buy whatever I want. So like, that's what I'm gonna. I always wanted one, and like So he did. He bought it, and it's just he always has these really funny reasons why he wants to buy cars, and they're either rooted in like childhood memories or the fact that it's supposed to be a great, fun driving experience.
Right. And that's another thing too. I'm glad you said that, because I think that's what we all do as like car people. We try to make our younger self happy.
Right.
We're always trying to get that thing that we wanted when we were 5, 10 years old, had a poster of, had a Hot Wheel of, had a model car of, and things like that, because at the end of the day, we want to have the car because of what it means to us.
Right.
And
we never grow up.
We never grow up, and we never stop wanting to be in the car. And I think it's cool that all these cars he drives on. Like, I think it's really cool that a lot of things that he has, most people would just be like, I'm going to sit on that, I'm going to take it to the auction, I'm going to come up off of it, and I'm going to do it again and again. But he's like, I'm going to sit on it, and I'm going to drive it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And like, I guess, I don't know if he's ever mentioned it, but like, what's kind of his theory behind driving cars versus just collecting dust?
So a good question, because well, so as you look around in the garage, you can see such a variety of cars, and the amount of driving they get is equal variety.
Yeah.
So the F40 behind me, for instance, it gets driven. He's driven it on track.
Yeah.
But now the car's worth $3.5 million. It's arguably the nicest F40 in the country because it won Platino at Cavallino in 2017. So it's nice. Like it's kind of irreplaceable. So he's not going to just drive it to dinner, right? Like he's going to pick something else. But if there's a nice, cool event that he can drive to where he knows the parking's going to be safe, and you got to pick and choose your battles with your cars, right?
Of course.
So if it's a good, safe drive, that's when he drives it. Or there's if there's a special reason. Talking about the F40, I'll try not to talk about it too much. But we have a friend who was working for the APD, and he passed away recently.
Okay.
Because of some cancer. It was really sad because the guy was super cool. He was part of the Ferrari club. Well, one of his lifehood dreams was to go for a ride in an F40. And, so Jeff was out of town, but they called him and they're like, hey, can we give this guy a ride in your F40? You're the only guy in town that we know of that has one that's running perfectly. So I got the phone call like, hey, Glenn, can you give this guy a ride? And like give him a ride in an F40? And it's like, I guess I can tear myself away from what I'm doing to do it. But yeah, and then it ended up being like this really fun, I think we hit like 170 on the tollway or something, and it was a fun ride, right? And so they get driven, they get used. Jeff is not afraid to drive his stuff, but he's not going to just randomly drive, the multi-million-dollar cars to Uchiko and park it in the valet parking. Yeah. But he also is aware that one of the worst things you can do for cars is to not drive them. Cars they're built to be driven, and if they just sit, they don't like that. The tires don't like that. The gaskets don't like that. Nothing likes to just sit, right? The only thing that likes it is the paint.
Exactly.
Like paint is whatever, So we actually kind of have a schedule. He keeps it on his computer, like when the cars are driven last, and if something hasn't been driven for a couple of months, his mission that next day is to go drive it.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love it so much because with all the different cars that he has, the experience in each one of them has to be completely different. And I truly could not imagine like not wanting to drive these cars every single day. Even as a kid, you always say, I'm going to have 1 million cars. I'm going to have 50, 60 cars when I grow up. And I was like, I'd be so anxious if I was him and I had all these cars, and I wouldn't be able to work because I'm trying to drive all my cars.
It's too many. I don't know what other guys that have, car collections quite this large, the Jay Lenos of the world, but because I think he's at like 300.
Oh, man.
And Jeff is at about 100.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't know how well Leno pulls it off, but you'd be surprised at how often Jeff will, you know, there was a period in time where he was really good about showing up in a car, parking it, jumping in another car, going get breakfast, coming back, getting into another car, go get lunch. And like, he would drive at least 3 cars a day.
Yeah.
And, you know, the reason why he doesn't drive that many now is now we have so many cars in this building that it takes too long sometimes to get certain cars out. And, yeah, he is one of the biggest true car enthusiasts that I've ever met. And it's about the cars, but it's about the driving experience more than anything with him.
Right.
And again, like I said, that's why, you know, he didn't buy that C10 pickup truck over there just because he thought it's a great work truck.
Right.
Like, it reminds him of a childhood memory and like how the vehicle felt when he was a kid driving down the road, and he wants to experience that again. And so, yeah, it's always about driving experience.
It always. And I meant to ask you this earlier, but like as far as car storage goes, what are some of like the craziest cars that are stored at Petrol Lounge, and any cool stories about the stuff that's stored over there?
Yeah, so one of the neat things about places like that is they usually, I know that they're a little bit, they're more public than I would have wanted it to be. While I was working there, we had a lot of cars that were hush hush.
Right.
Well, I'll go back to about a hush hush car, but they. I'm trying to think of like what's really neat. So one of my best friends has a dozen cars stored over there, and you know, he's got some really neat stuff. He's got you know, a Ford GT Mark II track day car. One of my favorite cars, a Ferrari F50.
Yeah.
They've got some really cool, interesting stuff. And most of the time, the real crazy, interesting stuff that gets stored, it's not about, you know, like, oh, this is this really expensive Bugatti. It's a lot of times it's the story behind the car, like who owned it. So I know that they've got some cool secret stuff that people see, you know, it's kind of out in the open, and it may seem kind of like, okay, that's pretty cool, but you know, they're usually hush hush about like what's actually the story behind the car. So, but what I wanted to tell you was we had, while I was managing Petrol Lounge, and I was still always doing stuff with Jeff on the side too, and I can talk about the car finally now. We had, and it was supposed to be a secret, and we kept it a secret. It was a 1940 BMW 335. So think about the year and where the car came from.
Exactly.
So dark days, you know, I don't care who you are, right? So
for sure.
the car was owned by the state, by Germany. So like it was a Hitler mobile, and we believe from what we know that it was primarily Himmler's car. Okay. Which is worse than anybody.
Yeah,
He's probably one of the worst. You know, he was the angel. Isn't he the angel of death? So, anyways, it was owned by the German state, and a friend of ours, bought it with the intent of restoring it and then running it through Pebble Beach.
Okay.
Which he did.
Yeah.
And it placed second. It arguably won, but the race car kind of beat it in its category. Okay. So, I mean, that's a big deal. To be invited to Pebble Beach at all is massive.
That's already
and to place, it's crazy. Just Resurrections in Taylor, Texas did the restoration, and it was, you know, they're like the best in the country. So anyway, so while that car was here, I remember backing the car into the garage. And I didn't really know the story with the car. I knew that it might have been, you know, owned by the, you know, like the German military or whatever, but I just didn't really think about it. But I remember getting out of the car, and the way I had parked it, I had to get out of the passenger side, which later on, you know, I found out, I was like, well, either of those guys, they never drove the cars themselves. They always rode in the passenger side. So I get out of the passenger side of the car because it was kind of parked against the wall. And this is weird. You know, like when you're kind of getting a cold and you kind of get like those weird chills?
Yeah,
I swear,
you can feel it coming on.
I'm not making any of this stuff up, right? So I get out of the car, and I swear, it felt like, it's just like this really cold chill. It like just like an ice block passed through my body. And it was the weirdest thing. I didn't think about it at the time, but I was like, oh, man, that was just kind of weird. I'm like, I kind of want to get away from this car anyway. And like, it was just kind of something about the car was weirding me out. well, in the end, the car was haunted. So we kept the car here for about 8 months, and it was really just me in the building most of the time. Jeff would be here sometimes, and Jack and Randy, the other managing partners of the car storage business, would be in and out sometimes. And but so I'd be here sometimes late at night doing stuff, and like this garage would just start making the weird stuff was happening. We had all sorts of weird stuff happen in this garage, and like we couldn't figure out, like we have cameras everywhere, so like something loud would happen upstairs and I'd immediately go to the cameras to see what had happened. Nothing. I mean, it sounded like someone just dropped a wheel onto the floor. It was like this loud bang, but nothing happened. I'm like, okay, something's going on in this building. I don't know what it is, but so I was convinced that this car was haunted, and like whatever horrible things that happened around this car were kind of coming out while this car was parked here. And it was always covered and kind of hidden. Not like intentionally hidden so people weren't curious. It was just kind of covered. Because we really didn't need to. And the reason why the guy wanted to keep it quiet was for obvious reasons. It seems kind of silly because the car itself didn't do anything wrong, but the people did. And there's people like, if you know about the atrocities that happen, like, you can understand why people would really potentially want to damage the car.
Exactly.
Right? So I understood, and I respected this guy's wishes as much as possible. So here's one of the funny things that happened with that car was, so then one day a local car shop asked me to entertain a lady who was there getting her car worked on. He's like, hey, we're not done with her car. Can we just send her out to your building and just kind of show her around? We need about an hour. And sure, so I'm kind of walking her around the building and just showing her cars, and she's a car enthusiast. And then, and I'm seriously, this totally happened, right? So we end up kind of by this BMW, which the cover was partially pulled up on because I was plugging in a battery tender to it. And she walks up kind of towards the passenger side and then like takes these really fast steps back and starts cussing me out. And she's like, why didn't you tell me about this car? Bitch. Like, what is going on with this car? And I'm like, what is going on? Like, what?
Because she hadn't seen the car before, has she?
She has no idea. She doesn't know anything. Nobody knows anything about this car except for me, the managing partners, and the owners of the cars, right? And I'm like, what is going on? So it turns out that she claims to be this, like she can talk to ghosts or something.
Like a, what do you call it, like a medium?
Yep. And she got next to the passenger side of the car and felt all kinds of stuff and just laid into me. And I was like, I don't know anything about the car. Let's get you back to the shop.
Crazy.
It was weird. So then the car finally is ready to be sent to Just Resurrections to be restored. And as soon as the car leaves the building, everything goes back to normal. Then it's just like, we had weird stuff. We had a truck that randomly, it was just sitting there running in park, and it popped itself into neutral and just like backed into something. And it was just like the weirdest stuff was happening while that car was here. The car leaves, everything was back to normal.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so there's been some really weird, crazy stuff, No,
I don't think anybody can top a haunted BMW story.
Oh my God, so
no, you can't top that.
So the funny thing about BMW was, they also had supposedly they had a flood or a fire, I think, in their records room in like 1950. And that's why we were having a difficult time finding out exactly the ownership, because they wanted to separate themselves from this BS too, right?
Yeah.
Because BMW, even though they supplied cars, like they didn't realize what was going on.
Exactly.
So, anyway, but the funny fact,
No, that is insane, dude.
Yeah.
Like, no, I would have been done. I'd have been done. Besides, like, I remember you told me that, we met because I was looking for a Porsche guy. And Haley was like, you got to talk to Glen. You got to talk to Glen about Porsches. And I was like, you know what? If Haley says that's my Porsche guy, then that's my Porsche guy. And when I first got here, the wall of Porsche, we stayed over there for like an hour talking about those cars. And it's really interesting to me, just knowing what I know about the Porsche brand. All the ones that he has are literally the ones that people are like clamoring for right now. Like GT4, that's GT4 RS, right?
GT4 RS.
That's the RS, and then the GT2 RS is behind me. Talk to me kind of about the process of getting one of those cars and the special thing about the GT2 as well. Yeah,
so with Porsche, so Jeff, in 2016, he bought a 918, which is their hybrid supercar.
Right.
They actually had a difficult time selling them at first because it was their first million car, and not everybody was open to spending $1 million on a Porsche. So, you know, Porsche did all these things and offered all these concessions to people if they would just buy the car. You know, and it turned out to be one of the best cars ever built, right?
Yeah.
But you know, no one really knew that at the time. So one of the things that they offered was, you know, our Porsches are starting to demand a premium over asking price. What we'll offer you is for a decade, you can get the GT cars. We call them the GT cars: GT, GT3, GT3 RS. You can get the GT cars at MSRP, and you know, it turns out to be a moneymaker for a lot of people. So yeah, so Jeff bought the 918, and so now, you know, if you go to buy the GT4 RS, for instance, you know, I think that one, it's got all the options. It's a Visac package. It's got the magnesium wheels. It's got all the stuff, right? It's 200,000 roughly, let's say. So it's a lot of money for anything, right?
Yeah.
And especially for a Cayman. But the premium asking over sticker, I haven't heard less than 50,000 over. I've heard as much as $100,000 over sticker. But if you're fortunate enough to make that purchase on a 918 brand new from Porsche, sticker price.
Sticker price.
And it's a big deal. You know, it is a really big perk for those purchasers, because Jeff has bought, you know, like a dozen cars since then, a dozen GT cars, and gotten them at sticker. And, you know, GT3 RS. Now, the trick is that Porsche, if you buy a car through the through the VIP gold ticket program, whatever you want to call it, you can't turn around and sell it you need to own it for at least 12 months. If you sell it within 12 months, they're not happy about that. And they'll give you some trouble. So. So everything Jeff has owned, he owns for a while, and he doesn't buy anything with the intention of just flipping it.
Right.
But you know, they keep coming out with new models. So every time so his GT3 RS that he had, the 991.2, he just recently sold because he's got that 992 GT3 RS coming.
I need to see that when it gets
which you paid
here.
sticker for.
I need to see that when it gets here. The GT3 is my favorite car, like almost ever. Like I said, I'm an old Chevy guy, but like that car, like it's ultimate for like a person that likes to drive.
Yep.
Like that is a driver's car by definition.
Yeah.
And like knowing that somebody is getting those, because I didn't know the thing about buying a 918 and you get the cars for sticker.
Yep.
I didn't know that about that, and that's insane these days because you can't even get a Honda as sticker nowadays.
Right. Yeah.
You know
Exactly.
So, especially if you're looking for a Porsche, you know, you know, a person that doesn't have that privilege of spending like you said, $50,000 to $100,000 over a sticker just to get that car, like that is amazing to get it for sticker price.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
And that GT2 is a PTS car, right?
It is. So it is called Sunoco Blue, and they went through a whole bunch of back and forth on figuring out exactly what is going to be officially called the Sunoco Blue color.
Okay. No, you
apologize for that.
It's the BMW showing back up again.
Oh my God. Oh my God, I apologize for that.
No, you good.
That's actually my alarm to normally go pick up my kids. So Sunoco Blue, it's Sunoco Blue. Took a little while to get the color figured out, but they did, because you know the color, like on the signs, you can't really put that on the car because it's like plastic tint, right?
Right.
So they, you know, Bruce Canepa, Jeff Mosing, Porsche, they all kind of got the color figured out, and so now that's the first car they've ever had painted in Sunoco Blue. So now it's in Porsche's palette, right? But that was the first, and I don't know if there's anything been painted Sunoco Blue yet, but yeah, it is a cool, unique color for sure. So,
and I've been seeing that recently because I knew what the paint to sample thing was, but I don't. Is it actually a palette of colors that a person can choose from, or is it truly like a custom color?
There's both.
Okay.
So Porsche has some colors that they call paint to sample.
Okay.
But like you were just saying, but they're there, right? Like, we have these colors, they're paint to sample, which I find kind of weird because it's like, all right, well, if you offer it, is it really paint to sample? But that is actually paint to sample. That's like, you know, you brought a sample and here's what I want you to paint it like.
Right.
And so that's what the deal is with that one. That is that's a real paint to sample car, and it does add value if it's a good color, right? Like if you paint to sample and it's like, I don't know, some ugly color, all right, it might not work out for you, right? But if the color looks good, you know, most greens, right? Like there's a lot of paint to sample greens.
I know a lot of paint to sample greens.
Yeah, you know, and those usually work out pretty well, you know. So, and blues, lots of blues and greens. So.
Yeah, and I mean, The thing about Porsche people, and it's always like a running joke that Porsche people care so much about like their options and like their spec and things like that. And a lot of people find it annoying that aren't, you know, Porsche people, but I think that's one of my favorite thing about people that are into those cars, because they're so particular about details.
Yeah.
And me being a person that when I see a car I like, I want to see every little detail of it. Like, of course, you look at, you know, the wheels a car has, what color it's painted, what the inside looks like. But when I see someone that was particular all the way down to the stitching, what they have on the floor mats, what they have on the headrest, it's like those little things kind of set cars apart. And people that like Porsches care about those things more than anything else on the car.
It's not unlike the car that you're building, right? Yeah, so like you're starting with this car and you're going piece by piece, and like, you know, my engine, I'm putting all this stuff into my engine. You know, you're just, you know, the difference is you're doing it yourself by hand.
Exactly.
You know, they don't allow you to go to the Porsche dealer and assemble your own, or the manufacturer and assemble your own car.
Right.
But it's a lot like that, you know, it's very similar. So yeah.
And I wish, man, and that's one thing I love about building my car, which is, for anybody that doesn't know, is a 61 Impala. I love building that car because that was at a time where you could order your car. And it was much like how it is now with exotic cars, where you actually got to choose your options on a car. And even like things like on my car, I have a 61 sedan, but it has factory AC. And it's something that usually those cars were just the pure commuter cars, like they had the very bare minimum, but mine has AC on it. And it's really cool looking back on those times and seeing those people that have preserved like their dealer build sheets and things like that, because now you go to a dealership and your options are already chosen for you, and you have to either get those options or you have to pick a whole different, you know, car. And yeah, I think that's what draws me so much to like the Porsche guys and their details, because I can only imagine being detail oriented, because my car was, you know, there were trees growing through it when I got it, so I had to pick everything out from it. That's kind of how I'm trained. That's how I'm trained to think now. It's like, you know, I gotta choose my seats, I gotta choose my wheels, and choose every little detail of it, because I'm having to put it back together. You know.
Talking about piecing cars together, so Jeff will put together a car, and you know, I'll kind of look at it on the computer screen, and I'm like, I don't know, I think that'll be okay. And then like I'll go home and try to spec out a car myself. Every time I spec out something, it looks terrible. I can't spec out a car. I can look at a car and be like, oh, that looks cool, but if I try to spec it out, I'm terrible at it.
I've made an account on Porsche, and I've spec'd out literally every single model. And once I'm able to buy one, I'm just going to print all my things out and just hopefully be able to spec it like that.
Nice.
Because I've spec'd probably 5 or 6 GT4s, easily over 20 GT3s, easily, that I've spec'd out, just trying different things, all type of Carreras, and just trying to find that perfect Porsche in the 992s, which it sounds cliche to say because it's the newest generation, but it's my favorite generation so far. I think it looks the most heroic of all the Porsches.
The GT3s?
Just the 992 generation in general, I think.
So yeah, the 992s, you know, and this is the first year that they have double wishbone suspension in the front, which is just kind of mind-blowing that just, you would have thought that they've been doing that since like the 70s, but no. And it's 2022.
It's the very first one.
Yep.
And just even that, because when you look at my favorite Porsche generation, the 993, is such a smaller car, such a more like almost more purely sporty looking car than the 991 and the 992s are, which they're more, you know, they have the big hips, and they're wider, they're bigger, and they look a lot more like a gentleman's car,
right? More
so than a sports car. They have like that Aston Martin feel of being like almost like that James Bond-ish, like, yeah, it's a gentleman's car, but it can get down too, type of thing. And I love European cars like that for that reason, because they are very all-purpose, because you can daily drive a Porsche. Yeah. But then you can take a GT3 to the track, and then you can drive it to work, and you can drive it back home, and it's the same car.
They're such phenomenal machines. Yeah. You know, and so my other job is I'm a driving instructor at Circuit of the Americas, and you know, so I get to spend a lot of time. And my friend who's hanging out over here with us, he had a GT3 as a track day car. Also, so you know, I'm there all the time, and I get to see what works and what doesn't, right? And you know, we've all heard the saying, Miata is always the answer, and if you'll see a shirt that says Miata, and it's Miata is always the answer, and it kind of is in some ways, but I think lately the answer, I think GT3 is kind of the answer now. Just not everybody can afford to get into them.
Yeah.
But, they've actually got a lot of trunk space. They got more trunk space than a Miata.
Yeah.
A lot more power than a Miata. They are, in certain situations, more reliable than a Miata, which, I might get flamed for that one. But, so you go to the track and, you'll see guys driving this brand of car from this this manufacturer's car, this model, and it's supposed to be their Hot Wheels, right? Like their hot shot car. And then the car makes it 2 sessions in the summer and then overheats.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's not the answer.
Exactly.
Right?
It can't be.
These GT3s, and I'm not saying they don't have something go wrong occasionally.
Right.
I've heard of like coil packs going and like they have occasionally they have problems. But you go to Circuit of the Americas for any track event and the place is littered with GT3s. They are everywhere. If there is 300 cars at that event, 150 of them are GT3s.
Yeah.
And none of them will fail.
Yeah.
Half of them are driven to the track.
It is amazing.
I know. And they're fast. They're like really fast.
They're fast and they're naturally aspirated and they rev high.
9,000.
And I feel like even if it wasn't fast, it probably would still it would trick you into thinking that it was fast because it revs so high.
Yeah.
And you hear all the noises and you
Wonderful
you feel
sound.
it like there's no it's not too comfortable where you feel like you're kind of taken out of the element. Like with the new Turbo S, it's extremely fast.
Yeah.
That car is fast for real. Like that's supercar fast.
He actually has a
Is that
Turbo
what
as S, right?
Was that his Porsche outside? Yeah. I saw it outside and I was like, that
Yeah.
wasn't here when I pulled up. And but those cars are fast, but they're really comfortable too.
Yeah.
They're really comfortable and that's probably the truest version of a gentleman's car because it has all your comforts.
Right.
And then the new one does 0 to 60 in 2.8, 2.9 seconds, something like that.
So I think it's faster than that,
And
actually.
it probably, and if that's what it says online, then I guarantee you it's faster than that. Because
Yeah, Porsche is always they're easy with their numbers,
I
right?
guarantee you it's faster than that in real life. But just knowing that you can have a car that I can take it to the grocery store, I can take it to work, I can take it to the track, and then I can take it out to dinner. And this is the same car, and I can put my luggage in it, I can take a trip in it, and it's the same car still. And if I want to hit the highway and I can do 150, it's the same car.
Yep.
And there's something to be said about a brand that can consistently do that for, decade after decade.
Yep.
And they are always kind of reinventing the 911 a little bit, but it's always a 911. Like, it's never unrecognizable.
Right.
And just I'm an Impala guy. An Impala these days is nothing like the car I'm building.
No.
It's front wheel drive. It has a V6. It doesn't have like the Impala presence anymore. But even a 2022, 2023 911 does have that same essence of a 911 as a 996, 997, or even just earlier ones. It still has that same presence.
Yeah, it seems to, it's just kind of progressed in a somewhat predictable, natural way, right? The Impala, I would say, though, that I think that the Impala has kind of done the same thing, but more about the theory, because the Impala, it just happens to be that back in the 60s, the people who were designing cars, it was just a different crew of guys, right?
Exactly.
But the criteria that the car has to fall under is kind of still the same. It's just that the end product is,
the times are different too, and what people need is different. And like the Impala, and I always kind of argue back and forth with people on Facebook about this, because as much as I love my car, and as much as I love Impalas in general, it blows my mind, and part of it just has to do with the fact that everything in our world is more expensive now. So naturally, when you buy something that's made of other things, like that end product is more expensive as well. Right. But what was this? This was a 59 convertible Impala that I saw sell for $85,000, and it was literally not put together. It had no paint on it. It was basically sold. The body, the quarters were on. There was no glass.
What year was it?
This was 59.
No, but what year was the sale?
This was a couple months ago.
Oh, wow.
It was a couple months ago. And, or maybe it might have been last month. It was this year. So it probably was last month. And, it sold for $85,000, and the body work was done. The car was perfect condition. It just wasn't put together, wasn't painted. It was paint ready. Suspension was there. It was still a project, but the original suspension was there. Interior was there, but it didn't. It needed upholstery, and that sold for half the price of a small house.
So weird.
You know what I'm saying?
So weird.
But that same car in '59 was a commuter car. That was a family.
Right.
I mean, even though it was a convertible, and the convertibles are some of the most rare Impalas.
Yeah.
Just because production numbers were low.
Right.
It was still
and it was still supposed to be just this family hauler, not something as cool as it is now, right?
Exactly. So, it was the family hauler that was attainable by the average American,
right.
And it just sold for half the price of a house. And it blows my mind to think that like that car has changed so much in ways that kind of make it a little bit more, not undesirable, but it's a little bit more out of reach than it used to be.
Yeah.
Whereas like the Porsches are kind of still, of course they're suffering from the same things, markups and different things like that. But it's still very much like the people that had Porsches in the 90s and 80s are the people that have Porsches.
They can still get them today, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
And it's just like you said, a sign of the times. Things are different, and the theory of an Impala is still the same. It's just that it looks different on the outside.
Right.
I meant to speak about the cars you had too, because I know the Lexus is outside, and is that kind of like your daily type of car?
It's my daily family get around, and it's great.
And you mentioned how good that car was.
I love that car,
and I'm
always
told
huge
people
Lexus
those cars
fan.
were good. I've always told people that those cars were really good, really well made, and they last a long time.
That's one of the things. They last forever, So.
And outside of that car, just kind of describe your taste in cars. Like, what do you like? What's always on your radar as far as cars?
Well, my radar. Well, my radar is for starters, it starts at a lower price tag than most of what's in here.
Right.
I don't have anything against front wheel drive cars, but I always want a rear wheel drive car.
Right.
My Lexus is one of the things that I needed was rear wheel drive, and the Lexus is rear wheel drive. I again, kind of like a little bit like Jeff, driving experience.
Yeah.
I want something that's fun to drive, something that's reliable. Well, I mean, I guess it depends on what it's for. So, like I was kind of talking about my Lexus right there. So when I bought it, I needed 4 doors, and I needed to be fast. WRX is kind of a benchmark, I guess I would say.
Right.
Like if you're slower than a WRX, you're slow.
Yeah.
If you're faster than a WRX, okay, well maybe you're getting quick, right?
Okay.
So this is a little bit quicker than a WRX. It's 310 horsepower, rear-wheel drive, and it's just super, super, super reliable.
Okay.
Right. So that's why I picked that car. But as far as like everything else goes, my last track car that was drivable. Because I currently have a car that I'm building right now. It's not drivable. I had a Lotus Elise.
Okay. I like that car.
And we should we pause?
Oh no, you're good. They can't hear it. It's directional.
Ah,
yes,
okay.
So you good.
Okay.
I was gonna ask you that too, but I was like, nah, we'll just let them.
No,
Just let
okay.
them go.
So cars that I pick. So I picked my Lotus Elise because it was just the driving experience. I drove one, and it was unlike anything I'd ever driven, and it's still unlike anything I've ever driven. I mean, you have to get into something really special. Well, I owned that car for 8 years, and every time I got in it, it felt special.
Yeah.
It's just such a cool, unique car. The car weighed 1,900 pounds. Lots of grip, great suspension, looked cool. It was a yellow one. And I never got tired of getting in the car. I always enjoyed every time I got in the car. So it was a good choice. But I picked the car because it was supposed to be and was a super reliable, great handling track day car.
Yeah.
And I put like 30,000 COTA miles on that car.
God, that's a lot of COTA right there.
Yeah, I mean, it was super, super awesome, super reliable, super great. What else do I pick? So currently I'm working on a Lotus 7.
Okay.
Is what
I was going to ask you what that car was. That you were
Yeah,
building.
so I showed you pictures of that. Yeah, so it looks like a running, driving car, but we all know that the devil is in the details.
Yeah.
And so it's got some stuff that needs to be addressed still, but it's almost complete. It'll be ready soon. But a Lotus 7, it's based on a 1969 Lotus 7.
Okay.
Which it looks like a kayak with wheels, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's not for everybody. It's not everybody's favorite car, but it's something that I've lusted for a long, long time.
Right.
And it's 1,300 pounds, 250 horsepower, and it was designed by Colin Chapman, who made some of the best racing cars ever, in my opinion. And so that's what, I like. For some reason, I think I like lightweight. And even with the race cars, race cars are only fun if they're reliable. So, lightweight, reliable, rear-wheel drive is always kind of the thing. So,
exactly.
And then, going more into track day cars, people can talk all day long about what they think is the best track car or whatever, but the keys with track day cars is it's heat, right? So is the engine going to overheat? Has it got the cooling system to handle the car? Are the brakes going to overheat? Has it got big enough brakes, big enough cooling for the brakes? Is the driver going to overheat? And is the suspension set up, and is the car not too heavy to overheat the tires? It's all about heat. So if you can manage heat on your race car, then you've got a solid race car. If you can't, I don't care how fast it is, you're only going to do, here's an example. So a Tesla is really fast going straight, right? We've had some people bring Teslas to the track, and they perform surprisingly well for a short bit, but the battery overheats almost immediately. And it's like, okay, great. You can tell me how fast you were for a lap, but I'm not here to, win a lap. I want to drive around track all day long.
Exactly.
The car needs to be able to handle heat. So that's the thing. So the car also has to be able to handle heat.
And that's I guess it's one of those things as you really because as much as I've always enjoyed cars from a kid till now, I always say I didn't really know about cars until I tried to build one. I didn't know as much as I thought I knew about cars until I actually had to turn wrenches and, put things together on a system-based type of way where I couldn't just throw wheels on something, put LED lights on it like I did my Honda in college and call it a build, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If that's what people do, that's cool. I also feel like I just want to let people do their thing with their cars too. But when I started my Impala, I realized I didn't know how brakes worked. I knew what they did, but I didn't know how a brake system
what actually was going on when you pushed the brake pedal.
I had no clue. And it's one of those things where whatever area you really get into cars, there's no choice but to learn things about it.
Right.
And when you said that heat makes a good track car, I was like, that makes perfect sense, but I never would have thought in my mind heat will make, because most people say, I got a track car, so let me put my wing on it.
Right.
And then let me put the wide tires and put the big brakes. But you have to manage the things that keep the car going.
Yeah, people get preoccupied with what makes a car faster, but it doesn't matter how fast the car is. If you can't make it more than 2 laps without overheating the tires, overheating the brakes, or overheating the engine, what good is it?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Look at some of the, Jeff has got a couple of his championship-winning race cars over there, and they may not seem like the fastest things ever, but the thing will race for 4 hours straight, not skip a beat. And that's what makes a good track car, in my opinion.
Exactly.
Right?
And I think that makes sense because, a lot of people that build classic cars, the question is not, okay, what makes a good track car? It's almost what makes a good street car. And a lot of people, there's so many different elements of a car that people get wrong when they're making a street car. And one that a big mistake I was about to make with my car was my cam. I was about to put a huge cam in my car because I wanted the sound of a huge cam.
Of course.
And then someone actually broke it down to me almost in a mathematical way of why I did not want a huge cam. And it was because I didn't really understand what a camshaft does to change the drivability of it.
Or what you give up with drivability.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
What the trade-offs are for that sound. You trade off being able to go at a red light when it turns green.
Exactly. Yep.
And just little things like that about cars, I feel like is what has made the experience so good for me, because now I know my car inside out.
Yeah.
There's no I bet the guys at Chevrolet, they probably couldn't tell me nothing about my car at this point, because like I've completely taken it apart. You know, every nut, every bolt. I've researched the car from front to back, the frame, just the structural parts of the car that make it what it is, because I've had to check everything off the list because I wasn't the first owner of this car.
Does it have a ladder frame?
So that car is, I guess you would say yes, because it was an X-frame car.
Oh,
and
that's
so,
right. Yeah.
So it does kind of have like the same kind of layout of like a ladder frame car,
right.
but it just does like the X in the middle.
Right. Okay.
And it's a very simple frame.
Yeah.
It's a very simple. That's why I love it, because it's one of those things that's not impossible to figure out.
Right.
Even just now, like that's actually where we at on the car. We're replacing all the body mounts around the frame of the car.
Okay.
Because the factory ones were rubber, and every however so many years the rubber just deteriorates, falls out.
Yeah.
One of them, we took it off and it fell apart in my hands.
Yep.
And
yeah.
we replaced all those with polyurethane and stuff like that. But I really do think that is a testament to like growth within cars, is like knowing those details about how they function and what each car's purpose is.
Right.
Because I had no clue, and I felt like, what have I been doing all these years reading these car magazines, and I don't know how brakes work,
Yeah, they don't always go into that, They just tell you that the brakes are great, and they might tell you some specs, but
they'll tell you which ones to buy all day long.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many guys, like, I also believe in, when you're building a car, don't tell people what you're doing to it until you've done it. Because so many people wanted me to get, the big Willwood brakes, and wanted drilled slided brakes, and I was like, my car has hopefully 250 horsepower. I don't think I should be worried about drilled or slided brakes right now, and things like that. Just making smart decisions when you put these cars together will teach you a lot about what a car is and what it does.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, even outside of just building cars, I know for a fact, I know what my perfect garage is. I know what 5 to 10 cars will go in my garage first. Unlimited money, unlimited. I'm already knowing what those cars are. Do you have a top 10, top 5 cars that, even if it's cars you already have or cars that you haven't had before, what would you say is a top 5?
I do. Top 5. It's always going to start with the McLaren F1.
Okay.
It's always going to start there. I will always feel that is probably the best car ever built. And I don't, again, we talked about usability. The car came with its own luggage.
Okay.
3-seater,
Really?
You drive in the middle, so driving position's as good as it gets. Like I
forgot.
You won't shut me up if I'll get carried away talking about the McLaren F1.
That car was in the center.
What's that?
I forgot it was like that I forgot the driving position was so close to like the center.
Yeah, no, you are in the center, and then the passenger sits on both sides of you.
Nice.
Yeah. So McLaren F1 is always in the top of the list. And my list is a weird one. So McLaren F1, Ferrari F50 is on there. I really, a good friend of mine just bought an F50, and I kind of talked him into it because I told him, like, I'm telling you, I know that it doesn't photograph well, but when you see it in person and when you drive it, you're going to love it.
Right.
So he recently just drove it on Circuit of the Americas too, and he's like, you were right. The car is magic. And I'm like, I know.
It is interesting how that car doesn't always look good on camera.
It looks terrible in pictures.
It looks kind of ugly on camera.
You see it in person, it's a whole other thing, because the proportions really kind of help out. So McLaren F1, Ferrari F40, and I've always had a thing for the Ferrari, the 512 TR.
Okay.
The 94, 95 Ferrari 512 TR. So not the Testarossa.
Yeah.
The 512 TR, which is a very similar looking car.
Exactly. I was about to say they have the same look.
It was an evolution of the Testarossa. Lotus 7 Caterham. Okay. That's going to be on there for sure too. What is that, 4?
Yeah, that'd be 4. That'd be 4.
Let me think. What is the 5th one? Carrera GT.
Carrera GT.
Carrera GT.
I was about to say, you got to put a Porsche in there for me, please.
So driving around in the, driving all of Jeff's cars in there. And it's a hard list because, just like we talked about, I'm a huge, I know that there's 2 Ferraris in that list. I like the Porsche brand better. Yeah. Overall, but it's just, if we're talking about dream cars or whatever, it's just those are cars that have been in my heart for a long time, and actually my real knowledge. And not like, just like you said, reading magazine knowledge, like my knowledge of like being in them, driving them, having like real experience like at the track with them, didn't come until Circuit of the Americas was built. So, in the last decade, my opinion on, or my feelings on cars have changed a little bit. So yeah, the Carrera GT's in there. So like if the list went down to like 10, some more Porsches would start showing up.
Right.
It's just like, like the GT2 might even make it on there. But that's a recent car, whereas like the Ferrari F50 has been there since 94, so for, almost 30 years, that's been a car that's been in my heart. But yeah, so Porsche, and the Carrera GT, it gets kind of a bad rap. Yeah. I'll tell you, it's all BS. It's all comes from people who don't really know about the car.
And I was gonna say, every time I hear when I hear good things about the Carrera GT, it's from people that have driven it before, and they felt how special that car is.
It is. It's one of the best cars ever. I mean, it's, I would put it up against the McLaren F1, but it would lose. But there's just a lot of things that the McLaren did that's just. And look at the price difference. Yeah. $20 million for a F1, $2 million for a Carrera GT.
Exactly.
But everybody complains that they're really hard to drive and they're dangerous, and it killed Paul Walker. Mm-hmm. But I'm looking at the Carrera GT right now.
Yeah, I was about to say it's right.
It's right there. Yeah. And I just drove it the other day to go get it inspected, and. I'll tell you, so it's a manual transmission, which is always like a car that is going to be on my list of favorites. It has to have a manual, And I know that, PDK or whatever is faster, right? And like I've got a saying that I've told people that I like to share, but I'll tell people, I'm like, faster isn't always better, and like people have already, faster is always, no, it's not. Premature ejaculation's faster, and it's not better.
It's not better.
Yep, manual transmission's not faster, but it is better.
There's our clip right there.
Yeah, there you go.
That's my Instagram clip right there. Yep, that's it.
So it's got a manual transmission. It makes it makes some of the most wonderful sounds in the world. It's got a pretty long wheelbase. So the thing is actually, like all the things that make a car great to drive, it has, mid-engine, normally aspirated 600 horsepower. I mean, it's a wonderful car. It's just, it does require respect, it is a analog 600 horsepower car, and if you just treat it with a lack of respect and just drive it like, all right, you know what? Anything is going to bite you in the ass, especially something without the driver's aids of modern cars.
Yep.
But you put it out on the racetrack and start driving it hard, and if you know what you're doing, it is a weapon, like in a good way. It is a 100%. Wonderful car, and man, the sounds coming out of that thing, golly!
It is. What engine does that car have?
It's a V10.
That's a V10.
610 horsepower, I believe. V10. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've always, that was one of the cars where like that car was a thing when I was a child. So I had book fair posters of the Carrera GT. Like that was just the car, like the shape of it. It has that shape that you're like, of course I want one of those cars. Like, of course. Even I wouldn't care if it blew up on me as soon as I opened the door. Like, I still kind of would want it. You know what I'm saying? It's one.
And they're reliable. They're solid, strong cars too. Yeah. So the clutch is. So the clutch is like it's a multi-disc small, like essentially isn't even a flywheel on this car, right? So it's just got this small little clutch pack like a motorcycle has, which adds to the sound. So like whenever you blip the throttle, it just boom, 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 it revs because there's no flywheel inertia that you have to deal with. And then the car has an anti-stall program in the ECU. So when you leave a stoplight, you're not supposed to rev it and go. You just kind of ease up on the clutch, and the ECU takes over. And then once you get rolling, then you can get after it, and it's to preserve the clutch. And you can rev the clutch, you can rev the engine, leaving the light if you want. But really, if you do that, you should be leaving the line hard. So like, bam, and just let go of the clutch. That's actually better for the car than trying to leave a light gently.
Just letting it go.
Kind of bizarre, but. It is such a wonderful car. I remember the first time I saw one. It was in 2005 when they came out. I had a friend working at a hotel near the convention center, and he calls me. He's like, "Hey man, there's this Porsche over here. You got to come and see this thing. It's unlike any other Porsche you've ever seen." And I'm like, I've seen them all. Like, I'm not going to, he's like, no, man, this thing is different. And so I drive over to his hotel to, see this car. I'm like, all right, this better be good. And then it was a Carrera GT. And I was like, I had read about these. I didn't think I'd ever see one. And here it is, like right in front of me. It was black. And on top of that, they had these Porsche factory Porsche mechanics were working on it because they were bringing it to the auto show and they needed to drain fuel out. So these mechanics are like back there working on the car. It's just like, oh my God, it doesn't get any cooler than this. Like these Porsche mechanics are like messing with the engine and like they're revving it and doing all this weird stuff, trying to get fuel out of it. And I was like, oh my God, thank you so much for calling me to tell me to come see this car. So I was super excited, checking out the car, and then I start bugging the guys, and I'm like, hey, you mind if I kind of keep peeking at this stuff? And I'm trying to remember, I did have a cell phone, but like pictures were really crappy back in 04, 05, right? But then I was like, hey, so where are you going? He's like, we're going to the convention center, but we got to do this kind of a loop to get there. And I was like, can I ride with you? And it's just funny because I can imagine people saying the same thing to me, like, I got to work, I got to go take that 40 to go get inspected. Can I ride with you? And I'm just like, I guess, Now, that's how I was. I was just like, oh my God, can I ride in this Carrera GT? And so the guy gave me a ride around the block in it to the convention center. And I was just like, I was in love. It was just like, this car is just the coolest thing ever,
Everybody's first story with a Carrera is that. It's like seeing Michael Jordan and then asking him to shoot around, and he's like, yeah, of course. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's one of those things where it's like you get to meet one of your heroes, but it's in car form. Yeah. And I'm kind of like you too, where like my top 5 actually doesn't have an Impala in it. It does have a full size Chevy in it. So like my top 5 would be like a '62 bubble top Bel Air. So basically an Impala, but without the interior fun on the inside. And mine aren't in any order either. Ferrari F430.
Those are cool.
Which is kind of like one of those Ferraris that people kind of like push to the side a little bit because it's fairly normal looking. Until you drive one. Then it's amazing. Obviously a GT3, it'd be a 991.2. I think that's kind of, as far as like even just looking on paper, because I haven't driven that car before, but looking on paper, that's the perfect GT3 for me. Like that's kind of like the one that's, no matter how good it gets, no matter how bad it used to be, that one will always be like the standard for GT3s for me. Yeah. It might even be a GT3 RS for me for that one. So that's 3. Number 4 would have to be like that 04, 05 Bentley Brooklyn's Coupe.
Oh,
that ginormous Bentley.
Yep.
It'd probably be that one. I love that car.
Yeah.
That car just, it screams like, look at me, I'm here, I've arrived, but I'm also like not riding in the back. I get to drive this.
Yeah.
Because I can never own something like a Rolls Royce Phantom or something like that.
That's a 2-door.
Yep. It's
That's right. Yeah, it's a 2-door.
It's a 2-door, but it's just as big as like
it is,
the 4-door cars are.
And so is the door. The door is like, isn't it a big, right?
That door is, I forget how long it was, but there was a video about that car and show how long the door was, and it was almost the length of half of some cars, how big that door was.
Yep.
So that would be 4, 5. It's hard. 5 is hard because
it's hard because the GT3 covers so much. It's such a good car. It almost takes up a couple spaces.
I wouldn't need anything else. If someone told me just get a GT3 and forget about the other 4 cars, fine. That's perfect. I honestly think my number 5 would probably be like a 67 Chevelle.
67 Chevelle.
That was before they kind of got the more rounded body. They were still boxy in 67.
Okay, and available with 454?
Yep.
Is that correct? Yes. Okay.
Or I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that car was 396.
Okay, Sometimes I can differentiate the models by the engines that were available.
That was 396, and then 454 was.
It was when the right.
Yeah,
that's right.
That next body style, which I did like those Chevelles, but not as much as that 67. That 67 looks amazing. I like the sharp, boxy cars. When it comes to old cars, the boxier and the more square they are, the better.
Unless it's a very excessively, so like the Lamborghini Miura.
Yeah.
Jeff has a Lamborghini Miura, and it's just this really cool, swoopy, swervy car. Yeah. And that looks cool too, right? But I'm kind of with the trucks.
We'll love a boxy Chevy.
Boxy truck looks
if I had a top 15, that C10 is going in the top 15. Yeah,
for sure. That's a sharp one, and that one has a 454 in it.
Nice.
A hot 454.
I love a big block Chevy. I couldn't make myself, because that was, so the whole thing with the Impala was, it was either going to get the LS swap like everything else does, which is because it's a great engine. That's why everybody swaps it. It was gonna get that, but once I thought about the LS swap, I thought about speed, and speed is expensive when you're on a budget. Relatively, it's easy to make a car fast now with the LS, but as far as like being on a budget, being in your mid-20s, like I couldn't really justify spending the money on the LS.
Right.
Then there was the big block, but then there was finding a big block that was worth my time and finding big block parts and making sure that the rest of the car could handle the big block.
You can find big block parts. You know, like this orange truck has got a big block.
I think that's the frame, if they can see it. Yeah.
The old dually that's outside has a big block. That's we got a lot of big block. There's
and they're
big block
there.
stuff is fun. Yeah. I mean, they were.
And I love the sound of a big block Chevy. I love the feel of one, and I will own a car with a big block in it eventually. I can't stay away from them, but I stuck with my 283 because it was dependable. It started up under the worst conditions possible, and so I was like, I'm gonna rebuild it. I owe it to the engine to rebuild it and at least bring it back to its old glory. Man, that everything you said about the just talking about the Carrera GT, but that honestly that made my day because I love that car so much. I love it.
I mean, it's just they did so many things right, and it's you know, there's not a whole lot of cars that you know, and I think that's one of the neatest things. One of the coolest things for me that has happened with working in this large car collection is you know, as part of my job, like I got to really poke around and like, you know, I have to really learn about all of these cars and, you know, specifics and just, you know, how they really work. And, you know, there's been cars that have gone through this garage where, you know, you start poking around and really finding out what it's like. And you're like, you know, it's not bad, but, you know, the Carrera GT, the more you poke around in it, the cooler it gets. You love it. I mean, it's just, you just keep finding all these really cool, fascinating things. And like, there were so many things in a car where you're like, you know, Porsche could have done a number of things with this part over here, but no, we're going to make this out of carbon fiber, and then the lid on it is going to be titanium. And you're like, why? Like, it wasn't even any real practical purpose for it, except for to just kind of overdo it. And that's how the whole car is. And then, you know, wood on your hand feels really good, right? You can't really have a wood steering wheel on a race car, you know, it just does. But the shifter is wood. Really? It has this wood shift knob. Yeah. And it's just the level of everything on that car is, like I said, that's one of the few cars I would say that I would put up against a McLaren F1 in any sort of comparison. Which is, in my opinion, saying a lot, you know.
It has that same like kind of elusiveness as an F1, that same allure as an F1, that dreaminess, the hero, that hero kind of characteristic as the F1 does.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, you know, a lot of the fancy cars, you know, I was driving down the road, and I don't remember what I was driving, but maybe it was like the Countach or something. And I just remember thinking, like, not everybody's happy to see you in some of these cars. People have, you know, and it's me, right? Like, I don't own anything like this, right? But I'll pull up somewhere in whatever car it is, and they already have their opinion of me. And they're like, this guy, look, you know, look at this peacock car he has to have. He must not have anything else to you know, of value, like, you know, to offer, so he has to drive around in this thing, right? And it's it couldn't be further from the truth. So just the other day, like I was telling you, it wasn't an inspection. There was a recall for these headlight adjusters on the Carrera GT, so I brought it in for that. And so I was going up the service road towards the Porsche dealership, and I kind of did one little, you know, just whoop through second gear, you know, and it's loud and it's fast and it's doing all this stuff, and you know, I kind of run through second gear, and I get to the stoplight, and a car a couple seconds later pulls up next to us, and it's a lady in her 60s in the passenger side of, I'm trying to think of what kind of it was a Volvo SUV, one of the newer ones. And I looked over at her, and I'm like, oh, you know, I'm sure, like, I could feel her looking at me, right? You know, and I'm like, she probably didn't like that whole, you know, screaming by her, because I'm pretty sure I blasted past her, right? So I, like, very nervously kind of looked over at her, and she's just like, and I was like, there's no way, really? You know, and like, it sounds so good. It just makes such wonderful sounds. Like, I don't know how anybody could not like that. So yeah, it's a special car for sure.
It really is, man. And it's a great car. But that was great, man. I appreciate you for talking to me for a little bit, because I mean, we can go on and on.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because we've only talked about the cars that are in front of us.
Right.
There's so many other cars back here behind us.
He has 100.
And I would love to come back and really go through the collection and to supplement this, because I don't think even just this 45 minutes or hour, however long we've been talking, really shows how great this collection is. And it's, man, this is amazing. I appreciate you for letting me come by and experience just this little bit of what Jeff has had and what he has here today. So are you on social media or anything like that? Or
I am. I don't.
You don't have to put your social media here.
Yeah, no. So my Instagram is. I am quite proud of my Instagram address. Okay. It's a Kodacab.
Okay. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. And that came from one of the driving schools. Was they were telling me one time, they were like, we never see you out on the track by yourself. You always have a passenger. And they made some comment that I was, not to really compare myself to Sabine Schmitz of the Nürburgring, because I know I don't really hold a candle to her. But they were like, you're kind of like, because they called her the ring taxi.
Okay.
And they're like, you're like someone said something along the lines of Kodacab. I'm like, Kodacab, that's me. I'm totally Kodacab. And so like literally that night I went home and I was like, Kodacab. I got like the LLC and the .com domain. On Facebook, my my wife is she's private, so I don't really I'll post car stuff occasionally.
Yeah, so. Facebook is I'm only on there just because it's on the internet and I'm a photographer. So if I didn't have to be on there, I wouldn't be.
I love social. I'm on there all the time looking at stuff. I just don't post too much, but I do post stuff on Instagram occasionally. Just cool. Jeff buys a new car, and it's like it's kind of hard not to post something,
Exactly.
But sometimes he's just like, hey, I don't want people to know I've got this yet. The Lamborghini Miura, that was a secret for a little while.
Okay.
So yeah. So nice. I don't know that I've posted any. Oh yeah, I did. I posted one picture recently. So.
Nice. Nice. Yeah. Well, yeah, y'all make sure you go follow Glen at Kodacab on Instagram. And like I said, I appreciate you again, man, for coming out here. I hope we can get together again soon and do some more stuff together.
It was an honor. I love this. It was really neat. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I appreciate y'all for listening. Make sure you tune in to all the episodes that we have up now of the Cars on Camera podcast. I'm loving this so far.